Good evening and welcome to Face the Nation live from Stein Studios in Ratmalana. Last year, October, was quite a significant month for Sri Lanka in terms of its international relations. We saw the US-sponsored resolution being co-sponsored by the Sri Lankan government. As a result of that resolution, we saw last week the High Commission of the UN Human Rights Commission, Prince Zaid Rad Al Hussein, arriving in Sri Lanka as well. During his 4-day visit, he met with several high-ranking officials and subsequently he held a press conference. He said that he was satisfied with the progress made by the Sri Lankan government. However, there are issues that need to be arrested and rectified if he is to support a transparent and a genuine report, the oral submission that is to be delivered by him in June. Where does the country really stand in terms of its international relations? What does the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva want to achieve? Are we on the right track in terms of bringing accountability and reconciliation to this island nation 7 years following the end of a bloody conflict? To discuss all this and more, I have with me two guests this evening. One is Professor Rajiv Jayasinghe. He was a former nationalist parliamentarian of the United People Freedom Alliance. Very good evening to you, Professor, and thank you very much for joining us this evening. Also joining us this evening is Mr. Jeevan Tyagaraja, Executive Director of the Consortium for Humanitarian Agencies, as well as the Chairman for the Center for Humanitarian Affairs. Good evening, Jeevan, and thank you very much for joining us on our show this evening.
Good evening.
Let me start off our discussion today with you. Mr. Tyagaraja, how do you view the visit made by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights in Geneva last week, and what do you gather from it?
I have several points that I'd like to make. Of course, his overall visit went well compared to his predecessor's visit. He did geographically travel quite a bit of distance. He met quite a few different people. I don't sort of disagree with the 4 pillars of the government in terms of reconciliation, but thereafter I depart from where his visit and the overall focus. I felt there was too narrow focus on 2009. And very quickly, what I'd like to say is that our difficulties stem from the fact that we have a problem with our justice system. Now, this is not ducking the issue at all. In the National Human Rights Action Plan, which the Cabinet approved in 2011, it highlighted several deficiencies in our criminal justice system. We have had scores of commissions of inquiry of different presidents, which has looked into thousands of cases, left behind a few thousands, and we haven't finished the job. It is because we didn't finish those jobs that further abuses took place. We have long delays in our criminal justice system. Our correctional facilities have the wrong ratio of people in there. We have 50% remandees, 50% convicted. We need to look at the collective failure of our justice system to deliver justice to people. In late 2014, somewhere in October, November, there was a long statement from the Human Rights Council on Sri Lanka. It lists out a whole list of areas in which we need to pay attention to. And I think to focus only on 2009 is wrong. To be selective about abuses is also wrong. Prince Zaidi himself, the High Commissioner himself, said, look, for somebody who suffered abuse 30 years ago, time runs very fast. The LLRC looked at a time span from 2002. The UN looked at a time span from 2002. But our problems go back a long time.
However, Mr. Tyagaraja, making a submission to the media, Prince Zaid said very clearly that he spoke to a rape victim during the JVP insurrection. Does that mean that the ambit of the investigations have now broadened?
The ambit of the investigation, I don't think, goes back beyond 2002. But Sri Lanka's focus must be to ensure that the system is remedied, that it is on par with the best in the world, and that no abuse or no violation is left ignored. If you do, it returns by way of impunity and recurrence of conflict and other abuses.
In terms of getting foreign judges to come to Sri Lanka and participate in the judicial process, is that practical?
It will be difficult.
Is it going to work?
I think it will be difficult, but I see...
Is it going to work, Mr. Tyagarajan?
No. I think the word hybrid will work slightly differently. I don't subscribe to the theory that our judges are unbalanced. I think, as he said in his statement, he said they are highly politicized, unbalanced and unreliable. That's simply out of order. Absolutely out of order.
He made reference to the past.
Yeah, but,
I
think to denigrate the judiciary like that is out of order. That is not true of the entire judiciary. But the fact of the matter is...
But you have a former Chief Justice who took a few U-turns, and it brings to the context, did our judiciary really work on par with international standards? We have a former Chief Justice who says something today and then he changes his word tomorrow.
I think you used an interesting point about international standards. We have put a firewall around us. We judge ourselves in terms of our own standards. That's not good enough. We need to judge ourselves in terms of the best around the world. There we haven't done enough at all.
So our judicial process was free, fair and transparent in the past?
Free and fair, I think that's relative. It really depends on which issue you're looking at. But a judiciary will be tested in terms of what's presented before it and what it does with that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tyagarajan. We'll stop at that for the moment. However, we will delve deep on the issues that you pointed out right now. Let me move on to Professor Rajiv Jayasinghe, former nationalist MP of the United People's Freedom Alliance, as well as the former leader of the Liberal Party. He was involved with the UN Human Rights Council sessions in Geneva between 2007 and 2009, and then he got involved again in 2012. Professor Rajiv Jayasinghe, what does the international community really want from Sri Lanka? The time starts now.
Well, let me go back to a classic line delivered by one of the pillars now of Sri Lankan society in the eyes of the new government. Radhika Kumaraswamy in 2009, after the special session, in which the Human Rights Council voted resoundingly in favor of Sri Lanka. She sent out an email saying, all is darkness. I think the same situation now applies. All is darkness, because no one quite seems to know what anyone else wants. And I think we are actually, in dealing with the West, dealing with a rather schizophrenic society. You know, they had one passionate desire, which was to get rid of Mahinda Rajapaksa. I still remember telling him many years ago, why don't you engage in some reforms, a few very simple measures, in line of course with the 2009 resolution, would relieve us of this pressure. And he said to me rather sadly, whatever I do, they will hate me. And I think he was right. And you know, I think the proof of that is a controversy that's come up now, the passionate support of the West, not the West, the Europeans were horrified, but America and England.
Are you trying to say that the international community wanted to get rid of Mahinda Rajapaksa?
Of course they did, everyone knows that. And you know, don't pretend innocence, you know it yourself. But if you look at the support they gave to Sarath Fonseca, whom they had been execrating earlier as the great villain.
You cannot read my mind. So you need to just speak to yourself and not try to read my mind and bring that perspective.
Shamir, I will say what I think, you can disagree. But we have had discussions in private before, and although I may be perhaps extrapolating a bit, I think you know exactly what I mean. You also know that the Americans and the British and the CP, I'm so sorry Dr. Sarwan Muthu is not here today, then that he cancelled at the last minute. I hope it wasn't because I'm here. But he and they were solidly in support of Sarath Fonseca, whom been execrating some time before. And a leading Indian politician told me that Bob Blake had told him, we have got the perfect weapon against Mahinda, which was Sarath Fonseca. And that poor man was used and I think he suffered unduly in terms of the way he was treated judicially, but he should not have let himself be used as part of regime change exercise. Now the regime change that happened this time, which I hasten to say I was supportive of, because I thought Maithripala Sirisena stood for continuity but against corruption. That regime change has happened, and unfortunately the West doesn't quite know what to do, because now they have a government they like, but they're putting so much pressure on it that day by day that government is going to become more unpopular. And I think they really must make up their minds. Do they want a government that, will do what they want in Sri Lanka? Or do they want to polarize their society even worse than the Tigers did? And I think that is why there really needs to be some rethinking on rational grounds, instead of this continuation of what Radhika said is, endless darkness. Darkness at noon, as Kirsten might have put it.
You spoke of the international community, Professor Vijay Singha. What do they want right now?
Well, as I said, they don't really know what they want. They got their first desire, which was to remove Mahinda Rajapaksa. They now got a regime that is much more pro-them than pro-China. I think this government hasn't realized, as we kept saying all along, that our primary friend should be India. And I think even the Indians are not especially happy that this government seems to think that the path to Delhi lies through Washington. But there is, as we were discussing a bit earlier, you're the one who said that there seems to be no foreign policy at all. And I would agree with you. I wouldn't have put it perhaps as strongly as you did. But the very simple fact is that this government is, I think, on the wrong track in terms of international relations. And the Western people who set up this attempt to attack us for what they have done much worse, they are in a dilemma.
Thank you very much, Professor Rajiv Vijay Singha. I now move on to Dr. Pratibha Mahanameheva. Thank you very much, Doctor, for joining us on a very short notice, and thank you very much for being here today on our show, Face the Nation. My question to you is, Dr. Mahanameheva, you were involved with the Human Rights Commission as well. Prince Zaid, in his statement, very clearly articulates that he is very satisfied with the conduct of the Human Rights Commission right now. What does that really mean? Does that mean that you all did not do your job properly? The time starts now.
You have to comparatively see it. Before Prince Said Al Hussein, Dr. Navanidan Pillai visited. That was in 2013. She was also very happy with the work at that time. So, at the time Dr. Navanidan Pillai visited, lot of issues. We had a discussion face to face. Thereafter she was happy, but she instructed us how to keep on moving with education part. At that time, Professor Rajiv knows very well, LLRC report as well as 2011-2016 Human Rights Action Plan, which was allocated for Sri Lanka. Human Rights Commission was the Human Rights Education. Human Rights Commission is not a court. Now, present Sri Lankan Human Rights Commission had taken to courts now. So, you have to see little bit. And the notice was also issued in a case, HND case. I'm not telling that, we'll come to that step by step. The issue is this, you have to analyze it. In our time there was a little bit delay of issuing reports. Pratupastula report, and there were certain reports. So,
what was the reason behind this?
Sorry?
What was the reason behind this?
Reason means we have to investigate. Immediately you got this HND report and Sri Lanka police went to Court of Appeal. So you have to, you see the comparatively, I am telling you. You need some time. Immediately you can't issue a report. You have to investigate. All 5 commissioners must participate for that. And thereafter thorough analysis only. Now, the main allegation made by police department, natural justice not met. Enough hearing was not given to Sri Lanka Police Department officers. I don't want to talk that beyond that because there is a court case. But I want to say something. I was in Geneva 2014. I saw how the campaign was going on. Said Al Hussein also there, Prince Said at that time. There was a resolution. For this resolution, who supported? Only 9 to 10 countries supported. China was fully campaigning for Sri Lanka. On the other side, USA, they try to get more of the votes against Sri Lanka. I'll give one example, Vietnam. Vietnam was fully campaigned not to vote for Sri Lanka, but last moment Vietnam supported us and 12 was abstained. So likewise, this last regime, it was not much sophisticated, not facilitated for international community, as Professor said. But my argument is this. Now, what was the promise given by Minister of Foreign Affairs in 2015? To set up a domestic mechanism. Have we set up the domestic mechanism? Sayyid Al-Hussein Prince can come and satisfy us and go. But don't trust that. Then, there is another session coming in February. End of February and March. Then we have to make a verbal statement. He is only the High Commissioner for Human Rights. But 47 countries are there. They may ask the progress.
But all 47 countries endorsed the resolution last October.
Yeah. So, at that time, US sponsors resolution, mainly it was therefore hybrid court, comprising Sri Lanka judges as well as Commonwealth judges. But that is diluted. No? Prime Minister say one thing, President say one thing in Sri Lanka. So finally, what is the structure? Have we prepared a term of reference for this domestic inquiry?
You are a lawyer by profession,
Yeah.
Dr. Mahana Mehra. Do you think that the hybrid court mechanism is going to work?
I think hybrid court is basically a good system. That I agree. Because as a human rights lawyer, I have seen many countries. But the mandate should be very clearly given. Why we are finding? Now, after appointing judges, local and foreign judges, what is the scope? And also you have to see the, plan, how we are going to investigate it. Who is the chief person in that inquiry? Theoretically, it is not a bad concept. But it is good. But my argument start with a national inquiry.
Thank you very
With
much.
that we can promote a lot of human rights. Give me 1 minute, one second. Now, Sayyid Prince Al-Hussein also made a statement. In last statement, if you clearly followed, he is not 100% satisfied. We must provide a mechanism.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mahana Mehra. I open the floor for questions from our journalists. On my immediate right is Nadim Majid. Nadim, you look pretty sleepy today.
Well, it's quite late compared to our usual time.
The show is live. You can direct your questions on our Facebook page as well. On to my immediate left is Sonali Wanikbadge. So nice to have you on board. And on to my far left is Faraz Shawkatali. Let's start off with Faraz today.
Thank you, Shamir. This question is for Mr. Tyagaraja, please. In all honesty, what has the Prince achieved? He's made a flying visit. Well, there's no ships, I suppose, so he's made a visit. 2 days. What has he really achieved?
I can only go by what's been said or reported in the public domain. One, I think he's been able to clarify for the time being his reading of the resolution and the progress, if any, as he has seen it in Sri Lanka. He's been able to clarify, I would say. He's gone and consulted in the north, in the south. He's met the President and the Prime Minister, and I think he's assured himself in terms of the stance of the leadership in the country. Beyond that, I think one has to wait and see. He will have to wait and see as to how things unfold in this planning phase, which is on right now.
He's sort of almost ignored the Prime Minister's acknowledgement that the missing are most probably dead. That's the Prime Minister's words to another network. So he hasn't commented on that. He's just come here, he's had a look. What's the message he's sending?
Faraz, the Prince did comment on that. He said that it's very disturbing to note the Prime Minister's statement with regard to the disappeared Faraz. Just to clarify.
Thank you. What I'm saying, I think what I'm really trying to say is that the Prime Minister is saying this when we've not had our own investigation into this. He's just saying they're most probably dead. Does he know things that we don't know?
The one thing that I can pick up, when he was in Davos, in an interview, I suspect, to Channel 4, I think, he said, look, we have no illegal places of detention now. We have, I think he was saying, we have accounted for whoever is in our custody.
Yes, see, he said 292. Apart from that, there are no others.
That's right. So if anybody else is reported missing, then they are missing.
They're dead, according to the Prime Minister. He doesn't acknowledge that they may be in Australia or Canada or wherever else, because they didn't all leave through Bandaranaike Airport, did they?
Right.
That's why there is need to be a proper local investigation.
Could I expand a bit on that?
Of course.
See, that was my opening point too, because all the commissions of inquiry in the past were based on the missing. There's copious statistics on the missing. Copious statistics on the missing. Even later, after 2009, there were 2 householder surveys. One, some people questioned it. The second one is very difficult to question, because these are householders reporting on who they're missing and why they're missing. And for some reason, that report is not being discussed sufficiently. It's a very credible report. This is a report which I had actually pointed out to even our current Commission on Disappearance, the Partnership Commission, to look at it. It tells you which household, where, and it's a testimony of the family. So it's not very difficult to understand as to who's reported missing and for what reason. So that knowledge is there on the table.
Thank you.
Can I make a point on that?
Yes, Professor.
You see, very simply, the Prime Minister, as usual, has been simplistic, because he has assumed that the missing he's talking about are the people who were reported missing in terms of being taken into custody. Now, as you know, the LLRC also dealt with this. And what we advocated many years ago when we did the National Reconciliation Policy is there are really different categories of missing. There are the people who are missing, about whom those who report them missing can give you no details at all. There's a large number, and you know, I found this when I went in the north, who are missing after they were taken away by the LTTE in forced conscription, and the parents never knew what happened to them. And then there's a smaller number, but a very significant number, which the LLRC highlighted, of those who were missing after they surrendered following the end of the war. Now, with regard to those, the LLRC said, and it's something we've repeated, I said it way back in 2009, that is where there is need for investigation. Now, with regard to those who were missing after they vanished long before 2009, it's possible that they are dead. It is possible that they went away, because we know several people left, both from Mullavaik Kal and afterwards. Some of them actually left after they were released from the Manic Farm. I know that some of the people who attended my rehabilitation workshops then later could not be traced, and their friends said they had gone off to India. So those are things that require investigation. But I think one very significant fact which the census of 2011 revealed, that the vast majority of those who were missing or reported missing after the census were in the age group from 15 to 40. So, to paraphrase a report, there was no indiscriminate killing of civilians. The children under 15 by and large survived, and there are very few reports of them missing. The people over 40 and 50 survived. It was the people who became, through no fault of their own, cannon for the LDT, in what the UN described as a hostage situation. They are amongst the missing. But I think there is a big difference between saying they are dead in the context of the detention camps, because as the LLRC said, some people were taken into detention and they're never seen again, and for those we should have investigation and closure, and the large majority. So I think those distinctions need to be obtained, and simplistic statements do not help.
Dr. Mahana Maheva, concluding his official visit to Sri Lanka, Prince Zaid, who convened a media briefing, said that Sri Lanka has also failed to deal with critical issues such as people with different sexual orientations and other groups suffering discrimination. Now, Sri Lanka is yet to decriminalize homosexuality. But moving forward, how do we ensure that we become more inclusive?
Yes. Now basically LGBTIQ rights, now there is a discussion in the society.
Right.
Most of the NGOs now they have started voice. Equal Grounds has submitted a report to incorporate gender orientation and similar pattern to Article 12.1. Even Honorable Attorney General's representative, which visited last time this LGBTI rights sessions, she openly said one thing: we have not filed any case under this. Whatever the penal code, according to police, there are 7 to 8 cases, but also they have withdrawn that. So what they say, LGBTIQ rights basically protected under Article 12.1, right to equality. But I see that is not happening basically with the public servant as well as police behavior when
there's a lot of harassment going on.
Yeah. Now, now this is a very good opportunity, golden opportunity. If so, I don't know whether new constitution will introduce or not. There are still the debate collecting public views. So around the country, many places, these public views were there, not to discriminate them. And therefore the fight is starting decriminalization. But penal code, all these amendments must come with the parliament. So even if it is recognized as a fundamental right, sexual orientation and gender issues, I think there can be one platform. But even that, whether the culture supporting for that, that is the other issue. Now in Sri Lanka, what type of job these type of innocent transgender or even sexual changes, what type of jobs they take? Will they, whether the society accept their rights, whether the dignity of these type of innocent people being arrested? So there must be some awareness program also. I think law alone can't do it.
Professor Vijay Singh, how do you view this?
Well, thank you for asking me, because I mean, this was a significant part of the Bill of Rights that was drafted when I was Secretary of the Ministry of Human Rights. And, I told the Minister, why don't you ask the President to pass it? But, even the Human Rights Plan was delayed. Subsequently, I told Mahinda Rajapaksa, look, this was your idea. Why don't you put it? And his answer to me, it was actually quite sad. He said, oh, there are some things I don't like. And I said, such as what? And he said, they want to legalize homosexuality. And I said, well, what's wrong with that? And he said, no, we won't prosecute. And I said, that is precisely what you said. No question of prosecuting, it is the harassment that happens. And then he said, to Mahinda, I'll let Ranil do that when he comes.
But
when you asked about jobs,
when
you asked about jobs, you can become foreign minister.
Professor, the statements that you're making right now, I want you to take full responsibility.
I take full responsibility for everything I say. You tell me this all the time.
Yes,
I take full responsibility for everything I say.
You have to take responsibility for the statements
including,
that you're making.
when I cite you.
Yeah.
I take full responsibility.
Yes, please.
And I tried to push this. I think it was a great pity that the whole Bill of Rights wasn't done, and I would disagree with Dr. Mahanam. I don't think you want to have it by penal code. I think it must be enshrined as a right. Now, I find it rather sad that, Prince Said comments on this with regard to Sri Lanka. I don't know whether it's legalized in Jordan. Do you know? I think you should investigate that. What about legalizing it in Saudi Arabia?
Many Middle East countries.
There are many Middle East countries where it's criminal, and I think while I fully agree with Prince Said that we should be moving towards the Bill of Rights that was formulated under Mahinda Rajapaksa's presidency, I also think it's a shocking example of what I call double standards. Because I don't really see enough focus on this, and I think it's very important in the Human Rights Council. And I think perhaps you all should have asked Prince Said, what have you done about legalizing gay rights in the Middle East?
You can't be changing the Quran again,
Sorry?
The Quran is the Quran. That's it. You can't be changing that. It's a religious
Well, there are various interpretations of the Quran. You remember the boys that the suicide bombers will get in paradise. That is also in the Quran.
No, that's not. That's some misrepresentation of the facts.
Well, I bow before your superior knowledge
That's all
of Islam,
rubbish,
but
actually.
certainly there are some passages in the Quran which refer to this, and you know perfectly well that in many Islamic societies which aren't Wahhabi, there are different interpretations of that. It's a bit like the thing on alcohol.
Professor Vijay Singh, we're talking about reforms
Yeah.
undertaken for the benefit of the nation. I want to draw your attention to something that you said in your opening statement. You said you spoke to the President about undertaking these reforms, and he allegedly replied, no matter what I do, they will hate me. But Professor Vijay, when you are undertaking reforms for the benefit of your country, should that be your motivation, whether the international community loves or hates
No,
you?
your point is perfectly valid. I agree with absolutely. He should have done the reforms for the sake of the Sri Lankan people and in terms of his own commitments.
Did you point it out to him?
Of course I pointed out to him.
And his response?
His response was simply, oh, the time is not right, leave it. This, if you remember, he used to tell me, you know, you must do these things slowly. And my point is they never get done. The same thing has happened to this government. We made a pledge in the manifesto, which I contribute to writing, to do 7 reforms. One of them, which is the only one the Prime Minister is interested in, reducing the power of the presidency, happened after 3 months. Still, no Freedom of Information Act. Still no electoral reform. Still no National Audit Bill. Still no amendment of standing orders. I saw last week a thing in the papers that apparently the Freedom of Information Act is going to be forgotten. I don't know whether that's true. I do remember when I brought it up 9 months ago.
I was reading in the
Raja
papers,
Senratna said, no, we're bringing it next week. It never came. The Code of Conduct for MPs. And that is why I believe these things must be done soon.
It was also
and if you
reported-
remember, I mean, the letter I wrote to Mahinda Rajapaksa in October 2014 was, unless you go ahead with the reforms which you pledged and which you're in a unique position to do, we won't be able to support you. And I stand proud of the fact that I was the only one apart from Vasant Sainaka who said that very clearly, publicly, before the election.
Professor Vijay Singh, in terms of undertaking reforms again, with regard to the Right to Information Bill, which is also highlighted by UN and the international community and political forces in Sri Lanka as well, it's been reported that it is being held up because of a delay in getting the assent of the Northern Provincial Council. Are you aware of this at all?
No, the report I read last week was that there were various complaints by bureaucrats. But the very simple fact is the Right to Information Bill should then be passed, leaving aside the provisions for the Northern Provincial Council. That will actually send a clear message. The Constitution allows you to pass such bills, but say, okay, if the Provincial Council doesn't want it, let it not apply there. Do it. You see, one of our big problems, we seek uniformity. You don't have to seek uniformity. But this is a vital pledge. It is a pledge in the manifesto of the President. No one has denied that it's a good thing. And I think government should have proceeded with it long ago.
Mr. Tyagaraja, a quick question to you. You highlighted a problem with regard to the criminal justice system in the country, that we are judging ourselves by our own standards and not to international standards. Do you think that with all of the fanfare over abolishing the executive presidency, the slogans, that Sri Lankans have sort of failed in paying close attention to those two very important other arms of government, the legislature and the judiciary?
Absolutely.
What would you like to see improved in terms of the legislature? For example, we are talking about the standing orders of parliament being, for example, we have all of these commissions outside of parliament to investigate things, when all of that through oversight committees can be done through parliament itself.
I agree with you. I think from what little I know about Parliament, government must report to Parliament. All arms of government must report to Parliament statutorily, and they need to be accounted for. In terms of justice, which tends to kind of stand at a distance is really not good enough, because you can do enormous
Even in terms of the UN Human Rights Resolution and the establishing of a domestic mechanism or a hybrid mechanism, whatever it is that they're planning to do you think that Parliament is just not interested in doing anything?
I'll respond in a slightly different way. We are looking at the collective weight of abuses committed over about 3 decades or slightly more. The human rights, it had nothing to do with Tamil speaking or Sinhala speaking or Sinhala Tamil or otherwise. It was about internal civil strife which led to extraordinary human rights abuses.
Who better to lead these investigations than the elected representatives of the people?
What I'm getting at, the leadership, the political leadership must square up to the responsibilities, the collective responsibilities of our collective failures. That has not happened. I think leaving it to technocrats and activists to define that is simply not good enough. So I agree with you there. If you're elected representatives and you're giving leadership to the voices of citizens, then you need to be around the table, the political leadership, which has been done in several other countries, and say, these are the parameters of our abuses. These are the parameters of our deficiencies. This is what we are going to address. We take collective responsibility for our failures. It is a collective responsibility. We use the word missing, the disappeared, the dead and the whatnot. We're talking about enormous harm done to civilians. We have failed. Now, why is that not clear enough? We will continue to fail if we don't fix it now, at least. If not, it triggers international attention. We are part of a global system. We cannot remain outside of it. We will be paid attention to by global instruments. That's what it is. So back to your question is that, yes, the political leadership must also sit around the table and not duck the issue.
Dr. Mahana Maheva, I'd like to pose this question to you as well. Since you worked in the Human Rights Commission, we hear from a lot of previous members, I won't name names, but that the Commission was unable to be very effective because of lack of any teeth, as in it only makes recommendations. Yeah. Thereby, do you think, therefore, that an oversight committee on human rights in Parliament would be able to function better and more effectively in terms of human rights than a separate Human Rights Commission?
I think Professor Rajiv knows this well. There was a cabinet subcommittee, and earlier there was a human right in charge of minister also there. But step by step what happened, these were also not functioning. So Parliament can make a lead role, but every country there should be a human rights commission, because Paris principles very clearly say you can't hand over it to the Parliament, but independent commission should be there. Now the main issue where Sri Lanka Human Rights Commission Act 1996 only can give a recommendation. If recommendation not basically implemented, you can't go anywhere. That's the end. You have to send to secretary to the president, and likewise you have to implement. So at our time we made a good recommendation. That is where it was in the Ministry of Justice, and thereafter I don't know what happened. If anyone failed to implement the recommendation given by Human Rights Commission, it must be submitted as a certificate to Provisional High Court. Through Provisional High Court to implement that. Then even public officers, they know they are tied up. But at the moment, many recommendations are there. If not implemented, there is no mechanism. But I mean, we can't only fully put into the legal side, but section Article 40, what it say in the Constitution, every public officer must promote human rights, protect human rights, and respect human rights. So Human Rights Commission recommendation is a respect. But today it is not basically happening. In those days also it never happened. I am asking HND case, and how many recommendations were given, whether those were implemented. But one thing is clearly there, immediately if you are responding, that is good for the international community. There we know basically they are try to push it and try to do some investigation. Even investigations happen. Sometimes how many report with these prison riots, 27 people were killed. Even this new government, have they implemented? I am seriously asking from you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mahana Maheva, for your thoughts. We're now going for a short commercial break. When we come back, we delve deep into Sri Lanka's foreign policy. All this and more after this short commercial break. Stay connected, stay with Face the Nation. Welcome back. This is Face the Nation. We start off the third round with Dr. Pratibha Mahanameheva. Dr. Mahanameheva, do you think that the government is wavering on its commitment on human rights since last October?
Now, this is where a national government. In a national government, the main issue, how to implement one idea. Now, SLFP say one thing, UNP say one thing. So there are some ideas, it will take some time to mix and to discuss and to come out with one idea. But I totally disagree one thing. What is there? The professor said election manifesto. Anyone can prepare an election manifesto, but it is not a legal document. But even we should try to make a legal document, then only even we can sue those who gave those promises under a contract. It is not happening. So same thing happened in last 2015 also, in the last October sessions. Whatever the pledge we had given, we have not implemented. So we are to delay. Don't trust anyone. Don't trust any nation. At a time when we are, arranging those things, another resolution can come up. But the only good thing where we see most of the Western countries are with Sri Lanka at the moment. Because in the US sponsored resolution, it was clearly there. Now, have we ever thought a plan? Which one we are going to implement? Whether it's a hybrid court, Truth and Reconciliation Commission, or even a domestic inquiry or a national inquiry. So we have to tell that. That's why this resolution basically say, even Sayyid Al-Hussein can't say anything, we are progressing. But human rights cases, there are certain arrests, there were certain incidents where immediately the police, after arresting them, they produced to courts. Those issues were there. But with regard to human rights, there are a lot of unresolved problems are there. In those unresolved problems, we think actually one or two isolated incidents. Not like that. See the Ambilipiti incident. Now in the Ambilipiti incident, whether the civil society talking at the moment, even the magistrate had given an order, even Attorney General, have they arrested? Only one ASB arrested? No. So people take law into their hand. What happened? The constable who went to take some, lunch packet or dinner, he was hammered. So this is not a good sign. Even the rule of law must be really implemented, which is not happening in some cases. So we can say whether it is satisfied or not. These cases may come in Geneva in the next session. One country can, raise this issue. And Sayyid Al-Hussein, all these tour plan prepared by Ministry of Foreign Affairs, anyone who is ready to say their ideas, no opportunity given. Even Twitter, even Facebook. When Sayyid Al-Hussein visited Sri Lanka, he should have opened a Facebook or even a Twitter. Anyone can send the message. So those things should be actually with the new latest.
Is it practical?
Yeah, it's practical. Even he's getting the idea. He's only getting one view. So you should be open. Anyone who is requesting to meet him, give some opportunity. I know with the time plan you may not do it. So even by this Facebook or Twitter or any other link, if you had opened, that could be a very good opportunity for others, those who fail to meet him.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mahanameheva. I now move on to Mr. Jeevan Tyagaraja. He's the chairman of the Center for Humanitarian Affairs. Mr. Tyagaraja, can Sri Lanka achieve accountability, prosecute war criminals as charged by the international community, and also give a political solution at the same time? Three things to keep in mind. Can we do all these three things?
Tough one. Last one first. Goes back to the question your colleague asked as well. The political spectrum has to come out and agree on how we deal with our history, including abuses. If you don't do that, we are not going to really get a conclusive process going forward. In terms of prosecutions, etc., to be fair, I think you need to be able to conclusively prove before a judicial body. I saw one of the past commissions saying, look, we have found X number of people we think are guilty, but it is not correct to make judgments ex parte. So I think you need to really use a fair judicial process to arrive at a judicial conclusion. And the mechanisms that we are debating will frankly need to prove itself in terms of what it coughs up, how it presents the facts. And I would also like to say that some of this work has already been done.
What is the objective of the international community, Mr. Tyagaraja? Is it to prosecute Sri Lankan nationals, the former regime, or even the security forces, to take them to the International War Crimes Tribunal? Is that the objective of the international community?
We won't go to the War Crimes Tribunal, but I go back to my earlier comment. When for a long period of time, let's say for example disappearances, we had a disgraceful record, an absolutely abysmal record in the working group on disappearances. Cases were there for 20-25 years without clarification. It triggers international attention. Once it gets there, it doesn't go away easily. Much of what's been debated now is due to protracted inaction on our part here, which has now gone overseas, offshore, into international forums. And that's something you cannot avoid any longer. If you procrastinate, that's what happens. That's the world today. But I must also say that this process is not entirely purely human rights and law. There is a little bit of politics in it as well. That's a fact.
There seems to be a division with the power centers right now. The president has a school of thought about the hybrid system, a hybrid court system, and then you have the prime minister having another school of thought about the hybrid court system. Do you think this is what the international community wants at the end of the day? Two schools of thought trying to come on top. Someone is trying to be on top of each other, or someone is trying to pass the other person and move forward and say this is what it should be. Is that the way to move forward for a country like Sri Lanka?
The High Commissioner for Human Rights seems to have passed the ball back to us by saying, let it satisfy the victims. We're not insisting, but it must satisfy the victim.
So if the victims are satisfied, the hybrid court mechanism system won't be put in place. Is that what you're trying to say, Mr. Tyagaraja?
Seems not.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Tyagaraja. I now move on to Professor Rajiva Vijayasinghe. Professor, you've always criticized the former regime, the Mahinda Rajapaksa regime, for handling international affairs in a very poorly way. But do you think that this government is doing the right thing?
Well, let's put it this way. This government is being astonishingly incompetent when it had so many good opportunities. You see, although I was very critical of the Rajapaksa regime, I still continue to believe it threw away a lot of golden chances. I also think that Mahinda Rajapaksa began from an unfortunate position where some people in the so-called international community were out to get him. I think he failed to work solidly with the allies that had come together in 2009 to defend the Sri Lankan state. But if I might also go back to something Dr. Mahanama said which was wrong, he was critical of the Ministry of Human Rights. I think the Ministry of Human Rights did a very good job. Jeevan was talking about disappearances. When I took over as secretary, we found these criticisms. We engaged absolutely. Dayan Jayatilaka, who was our representative, told me to talk to the working group. I found them enormously civilized, very willing to work together. They actually funded us to do more investigation. And for the first time in years, we were reported on positively. So what happened in 2010 is they abolished the Ministry of Human Rights. And that is one reason why things like the National Human Rights Action Plan wasn't taken forward. Mahinda Samarasinhan, who had been minister and done a very good job, was asked to coordinate action. He coordinated the interministerial committee, which never met, but he asked me to chair the task force. We moved ahead very quickly, but then I realized we had no teeth. And I told him, ask for a ministry. And in case they think you want to be a minister, say you will be the deputy minister if the president wants to be a minister. But have a body that can instruct people. As a task force, we couldn't. We found the permanent secretaries were very helpful.
Why didn't you communicate this to
I
the
did.
former regime?
I wrote to the president. The letter is very clear. I said I resigned because I said this won't work until you have a solid mechanism. Set up a ministry, either make Mahinda the minister, or if you want to hold it to yourself, I didn't use those words, but I said if you feel it should come under the presidency, have a good deputy minister. This was all in writing. And it was completely ignored, and Mahinda Samara Singh used to tell me after some time, you know, I think I should resign, I'm getting nowhere. But he never did. And it was a pity, because when he was a minister, he achieved a lot. And as I said, our interaction with the UN, we used to answer every letter that came from the UN, and they commented in their reports on the interactions they had had with us. We had a couple of people in the UN Human Rights Commission, notably Rory Mangovan, who were bitterly anti-Sri Lankan. And as Tamara Kudanagam revealed 2 years ago, after the resolution, he congratulated anyone on achieving what they had tried to do in 2009. But the stupid Sri Lankan government, when she reported this, punished her. Because of course, the people in the foreign ministry at the time, or the leadership, was playing the game of our enemies, and Mahinda Rajapaksa didn't realize this. But I think we really need to have a coherent policy, and that has to spring from what was in the President's manifesto of 2015 January, which is much better relations with our neighbors. The path to Delhi does not lead to Washington. Delhi knows that, Washington knows that, only Colombo doesn't know that.
Are we getting too close to the West?
Far
Professor?
too close in terms of, you know, we're doing exactly what we did in the 80s when President Jayawardena thought, because of his great friendship with the West, he could thumb his nose at India. You remember that? You know that Hamid was sent by Jayawardena to Britain to try to invoke the 47 Defence Treaty in case of an Indian invasion. And the British Foreign Minister told Mrs. Thatcher, who was very pleased with Jayawardena because he voted for her with the Falklands, that, you know, don't be silly. Again, you have to remember that the West is volatile. The West will change. Ambassador Blake had told somebody in 2009 when he was much tougher. They said, you know, last year you were very positive about Sri Lanka. And he said, I serve a different government. Now this government doesn't realize that with an election coming in America, you will have greater and greater volatility, so you can't rely
Thank you very much.
on their promises.
Thank you very
and
much.
that is why we should go much closer to India, which has had continuity in its foreign policy with us, and through India to the rest of Asia, including China, including the Middle East, including Pakistan, including Central Asia and ASEAN.
Thanks a lot, Professor Jay Singh, for your thoughts. Let me open the floor for questions from our journalists. Let's start off with Sonali.
Thanks, Shamir. Mr. Tyagaraja, we tend to talk a lot about the international community, about the role and responsibility of the government, but there are other stakeholders in society, such as civil society and individuals. So how do you indoctrinate these individuals which make up the greater part of society with what is called social responsibility, about caring about what happens to the country? How do we go about doing this?
Well, that's not an easy question to answer, but I pick up on what Dr. Pratibha mentioned about the response after Ambilipitia. Frankly, our civil society response is poor, it's selective, it's fashion conscious, it goes with the summer collection, the winter collection, and it has got very little to do with taking suffering seriously. And I think we need to, I include myself in that, I say we need to really square up, look at ourselves in the mirror and ask ourselves, are we serious or are we just seasonal? And I'm being very harsh. We really are not here for the long haul. We really don't crusade, go for change, act on it in a very precise way. When we make charges or we make a present a case, we need to be much more professional. I'm used to going back a long time, maybe 2 decades back, the amnesties of the world. They were very professional in terms of how they presented matters. It is about human rights and nothing else. We are not the same anymore. So your question is fair. We don't have a vision of the long term. We sometimes go for little bits and pieces, throw a few stones here and there and then give up. That's simply not good enough.
So moving forward, how do we change this?
Bluntly, I think we need to be true to what we say. We need to believe in what we say. If so, do please act. Human rights work should not become a project. It should not be monetized. It should not be based on monetization or project duration. It should be on the issue. Are you accomplishing things? Are you seriously taking forward things? Or are you essentially operating at 35,000 feet when the issues are somewhere else? Or are you taking issues and hawking it, marketing it somewhere else? I'm sorry, I'm being very critical. But that's all on the table. If others say I'm speaking a load of tosh, fine. But tell me how they're doing it differently and better. If not, all these things won't be littered around the table. A pile of skeletons of acts of omission and commission, which are illegal.
Professor Vijay Singh, I'd like to pose this question to you. We are talking about civil society and the functions of civil society. Mr. Tyagaraja, I'd like you also to join in on this conversation. Civil society, I mean, most institutions at the end of the day require funds, financing to function. If civil society were to be less selective and less fashion conscious, as it were, would their financiers be interested in them at all?
Well, I mean, very clearly, I think you've answered your question and you're perfectly right. I think I reveal this, in my book, which is coming out next week, The Rajapaksa Years, Triumph and Disaster. The first part is about success in war, but I detail the enormous opposition that the Rajapaksa government had to face from a conglomeration of forces, including civil society. But what we found is that they were earning millions. There was a German project called Facilitating Local Initiatives for Conflict Transformation. And Jehan Pereira was a very sincere man, but he was making millions out of it. Young Asia Television. Now these were the people who all signed in favor of Rama Mani. You may remember Rama Mani was the first who wanted to have international intervention here.
Can you prove the allegations that you just made?
Yes, absolutely, because I published the figures. I published the amounts given to them.
And
the reason I know this, it's because the Secretary of the Ministry wanted to do another project and she was asked to monitor it. She asked me because she realized she wasn't capable of it. She said, will you go through this? And I went through with it. Similarly, I found that the UN, and I scolded them, and Neil Boone actually told me, he couldn't quite understand what had gone on. This was before him. Neil Boone was a very good man. The three-piece secretariats were given $200,000 each. The LTT were given it completely, and they used it to put up a website to encourage suicide bombers. What happened? The Sri Lanka Peace Secretary, it was all given to a committee run by, the usual suspects. People now on the committee for reconciliation, like, Mirak Rahim was one of the people who was giving out the money. And they gave it out all to each other. So enormous amounts of money were given to these people. I used to call it the dancing butterflies, and I asked Janta.
And you can substantiate your...
Yes, of course. I published it in those days with all the names. The documentation was all there. And I asked Janta Dhanapala what was happening. He said, yes, I was wondering what they were doing. He hadn't checked. But it was all administered through civil society. And, Professor Uyangoda, I have mentioned this. I said, no wonder he called me a warmonger, because he was making millions out of this, the Social Scientists Association. It's all there in the records. They were given enormous amounts of money. And what did they do? They attacked the government. Because, of course, if the war ended, they lost their gravy train. Fortunately for them, a couple of years ago, I was told this, that, the Americans were willing to give a lot of money, not to bring down the government, but to any NGO promoting good governance. Unlimited funds were available, I was told. And of course all this was used, maybe for good purpose. This goes back to the point that I think Sonali and Jeevan were making. You see, human rights have become a commodity. In the old days, the Americans just said no human rights at all. And they used to withdraw from the Human Rights Commission, etc. Jimmy Carter, when I met him, I asked him this. He was a very sincere man, committed to human rights. But unfortunately, a lot of his commitments were then perverted, and a lot of funding is used for selected agencies which then fulfill a political purpose. I think that is very clear, and I think the funds will dry up if they don't fulfill that political purpose. And sadly, as Jeevan pointed out, the people who died in Ambilapitiya, the people who died in Ratapussallawa, they were not beneficiaries of this largesse, because unfortunately a lot of this has become politicized, and we have to recognize that the idealism of the old Amnesty, I mean, Anne Ranasinghe, who was the Sri Lankan representative of Amnesty in the 70s and a very idealistic person, she'd suffered, her family had suffered under the Nazis, she said they have completely changed. And I think we have to recognize this.
Mr. Tyagaraja, your opinions on, do you think the financiers would be interested if civil society were less fashion conscious?
No, not at all. Fashion is driven by the politics, and in a world where I think aid, as they call it, is much more sparse and scarce, it's driven by foreign policies. It's driven by foreign policies. Foreign policies are largely made by political decisions, and human rights funding is fickle. It's short-termist. It tends to, and I'm not criticizing outbound, I'm criticizing inbound. It's not reflective, it doesn't look at the bigger picture, and that is why in my opening statement I said, look, we have a huge problem with our justice system. We haven't been able to correct it. All these human rights funding for years and years and years. Has it changed? I'll give you one simple small example. What is called the Vagrants Ordinance in this country, a reprehensible piece of legislation. It should not live in any civilized society. We managed to get it out of the way. It has not been replaced, but people continue to be locked up under that reprehensible piece of legislation. How could you do this to people? We take people suffering from mental illnesses and lock them up. How do we do this? This is not human rights.
Do you think this can be fixed with greater transparency?
And accountability.
And accountability.
Yes.
So which means the right to information.
RTI and there was a famous judge, sadly he doesn't live anymore, he's Justice Krishna Iyer. You know, he said, look, you know, the street sweeper, the postman, the common man and woman, they must enjoy the fruits of this. I think that's the litmus test. But that simple man, the peasant, the economically inactive poor, they must be able to feel that they are being taken seriously.
Professor Jaisingh, you said that the international community wanted Mahinda Rajapaksa out. On the 8th of January last year, you supported Maithripala Sirisena. Who were you representing at that time?
Well, as I told you before, I mentioned that when I said, what I assumed with President Sirisena, one was that there would be continuity of the very successful and I think entirely impressive efforts of Mahinda Rajapaksa in the period from 2005 to 2009, and a lot of the development that took place under him, but there would be a cessation of the corruption, which I highlighted at the time, and the abdication of power into the hands of a small coterie, one of whom I felt was efficient. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, I think, did a good job, but the rest of them I didn't think were at all efficient. I pointed out several times in writing. I pointed out in writing several times that there was far too much family. And I also felt that people like Sajin Gunawardena, that was to me about the last straw, was when Chris Nonis, our High Commissioner in London, now to be replaced by the present Prime Minister's cousin, when Chris Nonis was hammered and the President didn't take that seriously and gave in to Sajin and Shenuka Seniviratna, who then became Mangal Samari's best friend, that I thought was a clear sign that governance had gone. So I felt it was important.
I understand what you're saying, Professor. Someone can say that you were also bribed by the international community to support President Maithripala Sirisena.
Anyone can say what they like, but everyone knows perfectly well that I am not bribable. I think Bandula Jayasekara actually said it. I must have made a lot of money. He actually said that on Twitter, and I twittered him with it, and he said, you must take these things seriously. And then later, when I didn't change, but when Maithripala Sirisena gave Mahinda Rajapaksa nomination, I thought that was the right decision because I would have preferred an SLFP-led government. But then I was told I must have got a lot of money to go back.
Who voted?
Everyone knows
Who voted at
well
the 8th of January polls? Is it the international community that went to the polling booth,
No,
or
I
is
think
it the Sri
perfectly
Lankans that went to the polling
sensibly.
booth?
A lot of the minorities, we told Mahinda Rajapaksa he had sacrificed the entire minority vote, and this is tragic because in 2000...
But you were supporting President Maithripala Sirisena at this time, right?
Sorry?
You were supporting President
Yes, of
Maithripala
course.
Sirisena at this time, but
in
you still had a chat
2011,
with
12,
President
13,
Mahinda
I
Rajapaksa.
kept telling Mahinda Rajapaksa you're sacrificing the minorities. My last long conversation with him was in 2014, August, when I recommended and said what this BBS doing is absolutely disgraceful. And his answer to me was quite surprising. He said, no, I agree with you. They are being supported by the West to make me unpopular. And of course, I knew that was not entirely untrue because as I told the Norwegian ambassador, the Norwegians had funded the BPS. My point to Mahinda Rajapaksa was that he was giving in them too much. Gotabaya Rajapaksa seemed to be patronizing them, and he was sending entirely the wrong message. But in January 2015, it was not only the minorities, there was a substantial number of members of the majority community also who felt that enough of corruption and the sort of abnegation to people like Sajin Vaskunawazana had to stop.
Professor,
and
you met Jimmy Carter. You said you met Jimmy Carter. Where did you meet Jimmy Carter?
At the Oslo Forum last year in June. It was a very interesting forum that they have every year. I'm afraid, just like you, the convener at the end, when I said goodbye to him, he said, you know, you keep asking the most embarrassing questions, but I'm so glad you were here. And you read my article on it. It's called The Elephant in the Room. But it was a very interesting thing because for the first time at the Oslo Forum, I was told that they had invited the Syrian government. Earlier it was a very pro-Western, you know, all these...
Who invited you, Professor? Tell me who invited you for this
the Norwegian government.
The Norwegian government. They invited Professor Rajiv Vijayasinghe to participate as what? As the leader of the Liberal Party at that time?
Sorry, as a member of parliament. It was a debate between Mr. Sumantharan and myself. It was about talking to terrorists. It was chaired by Tim Sebastian of the BBC. And in essence, I think it was a very good debate.
And you did not go there because of the funding that you received from the international community?
No, they paid for my ticket. I mean, I was asked this before. I travelled in 2014. I went to about 10 countries. And I remember a very good friend of mine saying, you know, is this paid for by the government? I said, no. The government hasn't paid for any of my trips.
Thank you very much.
My friends asked me. But, you know, when I went to Ethiopia or to Rajasthan or whatever, I pay for myself. I mean, perhaps I'm fortunate enough not to have to depend on trips.
Understood.
Right? So please don't insult me by saying that I was bribed. I know you didn't mean to, but even...
No, I said someone can say.
Exactly. Many people say that. I used to have people who say, you know, it is said, the passive voice, or someone can say. But I know you didn't believe it, so I will forgive you.
But your ticket was sponsored by the Norwegian government. Thank you very much,
of course,
Professor, for your thoughts.
I spoke, so was Sumantharan's ticket. I don't think that is
Thanks
wrong.
a lot.
I think at all conferences, I've been to several in India. I'm very pro-Indian, but it wasn't because the Indian government didn't pay. There are Indian think tanks to have me. Next week, Cambridge University Press have invited me to speak at something. I think, you know, people actually appreciate what I say, even if you might not.
Thanks a lot, Professor, for your thoughts. We're now going for a short commercial break. When we come back, it's the final round. Thank you very much and welcome back to Face the Nation. We start off our final round with Professor Rajiv Vijayasinghe. Professor, what is next? We have the High Commissioner making an oral submission in June, and then we have a written submission that is going to be made by him in March next year, that is 2017. What is next?
I really have not the slightest idea, mainly because I think most of the players don't have the slightest idea either. I think we have a tremendous dichotomy. I think it's a great pity that this government did not, to take up something Jeevan said recently was unacceptable. I think Prince Zaid's attacks on the Sri Lankan judiciary were really quite outrageous. You know, I wonder whether the Human Rights Commissioner will go to America and say, George Bush, you only got elected because the Supreme Court, stacked by your father, stopped the recount in Florida. We all know that in many cases judges make decisions that we disagree with, some of them not based on the highest principles of justice. But by and large, the Sri Lankan courts have behaved very well. There have been aberrations. We remember in the 1980s, you had excellent judges like Justice Wimratne, Neville Samarakun, etc. And then you had people like Justice Rodrigo, who said after the referendum, the people voted in the referendum to keep this government, therefore it can do anything it likes. We don't have a proper system of screening of judicial appointments. In those days, if you remember, all appointments are the sole gift of the president, and he sometimes appointed inappropriate people. So there have been aberrations, but by and large our record is very good. And some of the proof is the commissions. You know, 2 commissions have done very good reports, both Udalagwa and Paranagama. And I think it was appalling that the Sri Lankan government did not give the Paranagama report to Geneva, because that showed very clearly a very judicious investigation with superb legal experts like Desmond De Silva, who have been attacked by those who have been trying to sacrifice the Sri Lankan state and the Sri Lankan army. And this report was just not tabled there. I think it was a great mistake that we do have in our government people like the foreign minister who believed that our army was guilty of war crimes. I think that is very sad, because, I mean, an Australian diplomat who saw what he said, you know, he should resign. You don't go around attacking your own armed forces. So we have got people who genuinely are not believe these things, and the result is that we have a hybrid government, which is much worse than a hybrid court, because it will not do its best by the Sri Lankan people and protect, while doing justice and reparation and restorative justice to the victims. I think restorative justice is more important than retributive justice. We also must preserve our dignity as a nation.
Thank you very much, Professor Rajiv Jayasinha. I now move on to Dr. Pratibha Mahanameheva. Dr. Mahanameheva, what are your concerns right now?
I think this war crime resolution, both regimes have already politicalized. Now let's see, the last regime said, I am ready to go to the electric chair. That was the main statement which marketed in the society. Today what's going to happen? I saved you from the electric chair. Once again, both regimes try to market, try to sell it, and they may not do anything. That is my final conclusion. Even you must act like Israel did. We ignore totally. We don't want to implement this. But here, still we are twisting this side to side. But we have to properly make some improvement. To make some improvement, I think there is a committee appointed. With regard to this resolution, some artists, civil society, that also selectively picked up. And now they are analyzing what is the next stage. One artist already resigned because he had some other commitment. But when these committees are appointed, when these commissions are appointed, you must give at least a time period.
Who is deceiving who, Dr. Mahanameheva? Is the international community deceiving the government, or is the government deceiving the international community,
both,
or the government is deceiving the people of
I
Sri Lanka?
Both sides. Because the issue is this. United Nations Human Rights Council also highly politicalized. Because USA, they need their sound, their voice. But on the other side, China and Russia. So all they meet in one place. That is the Security Council. So 5 people having the veto power. That's why last time they were ready. Why Human Rights Council failed to submit the International War Crime Report to United Nations Security Council? That is my first question. There were several investigations done, and finally Human Rights Council never took a decision. They just passed. But our one, they suddenly stopped it. So that
why is that, Dr. Mahanameheva, the international community? Let's take Afghanistan, let's take Iraq for an example. There have been many human rights violations in those countries. Why is that a country like Sri Lanka right now is in the spotlight?
Yeah, now this is also West interest. Basically, last regime, China, Russia, they fully supported, USA went again. Now this side, USA fully supporting, sponsoring, and also we need to keep on moving with our human right, investigations. That is, they want to keep on target. Why? They need this land geopolitical.
Thank you very much.
This is a land where very important for many countries. So to keep their interest vested, both sides, they are playing this game.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mahanameheva. Mr. Jeevan Tyagaraja, we come to you, the last speaker of the day. Mr. Tyagaraja, we have Tony Blair, who says several years after the Iraq war that Iraq was a mistake. He gets away with a simple sorry. And why is that Sri Lanka in the spotlight? The time starts now.
Thank you. The only alibi I can offer is that from 2009 there was a resolution which was not carried. 2012, 13, 14.
Carried. Our resolution supporting Sri Lanka was carried.
Correct. The 2012, 13, 14, 15 interactions in Geneva has had resolution after resolution. You can't erase that. We are stuck with that. That's part of our problem. I think by going out there and being bold, we've negated some of the ill effects. Going forward, if I may, can I comment on that?
Yes, please.
I think what I would recommend is that we have done everything that we could possibly do to be abusive. Not much more can be done. We can do a lot to be the best in the world. There's nothing to prevent us from doing that. It is not as if we lack the brains, the intelligence or the knowledge or the systems to do that. We can do that. We need to just put aside our defensive postures and look to be the best in the world in terms of human rights compliance. This is not about being compliant with somebody else. It's about delivering a constitutional promise. It's very simple. The Constitution promises its citizens all manner of things. We just deliver on those promises to the best of our abilities and sincerely so. That is not such a tough task. We have enough experiences of how we could go wrong. It can only get better. We've spoken about independent commissions. We've got all that in place. We've got all kinds of international attention on us. We don't need any more. Let's just get this right and do right by our people. We have a track record. It's on paper. The UN Human Rights Committee has given copious notes on things to address. National Human Rights Action Plan has willingly said we'll do the following things. Let's go down and deliver in terms of our own convictions by our own people.
Very, very quickly, Mr. Tyagaraja, before we leave you tonight, the UN Human Rights Commission has said that they want Sri Lanka to be a role model, a success story. My question to you is, why not Syria? Why not Libya? Why not Tunisia? Why not Egypt? Why Sri Lanka?
That's an unfortunate comment. If we wish to be a success story, let it be on our own terms, in terms of our own initiative, in terms of what we wish to do. That's my response.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tyagaraja. Thank you very much, Dr. Mahana Meheva, for joining us this evening. Very short notice. Really appreciate you being here this evening, Dr. Mahana Meheva, Dr. Prithiva Mahana Meheva, attorney at law. Professor Rajiv Vijayasinghe, UPFA nationalist, former UPFA nationalist parliamentarian. Also, Mr. Jeevan Tyagaraja, Executive Director of the CHA, as well as the Chairman of the Center for Humanitarian Affairs. Thank you very much, Nadeem, for joining us this evening. Faraz, as well as Sonali, for joining us this evening. I leave you tonight with a quote. Reconciliation requires changes of heart and spirit, as well as social and economic change. It requires symbolic as well as practical action. Thoughts to ponder. Take care and good night.